Good morning and welcome to all attendees to this webinar today on exploring virtual power plant solutions for South Africa's energy future. My name is Chris Yelland and I'm the Managing Director at EE Business Intelligence, and I will be your host at this webinar, signed in from Johannesburg. Welcome also to our presenters who will be introduced to you in due course. I will share a link with you now on the Zoom chat facility where you can download the presenter biographies. So please keep an eye on the chat facility where you can click and download this biography document. And welcome to you, the attendees, for your interest and participation today. This webinar is hosted by EE Business Intelligence, and I would like to acknowledge some of the far-sighted companies: Meridian Economics, Nodes, Energy Group, Etana Energy, Plentify, and Energy for the valued support that they have provided for this webinar and for the great work they do in this field. About 1,400 delegates have registered to attend this webinar to hear what the presenters have to say on the subject. This attests to the relevance of the subject matter being covered, as well as to the stature of the presenters themselves. So may I thank the presenters and their organizations up front for their support and participation and for the time and effort that they've put in. Please do note that this webinar is being recorded, and links to view the webinar on demand and to download the presentations will be made available tomorrow morning at about 9 o'clock to all those who registered to attend, as well as publicly. The program for the day has been widely circulated, but again, I'm going to now share a link to download the program, and it'll be shared again now on the Zoom chat facility, so keep your eyes open for that. Nick van Doesburg of Meridian Economics will now make a 20-minute opening keynote address, after which there will be a 20-minute presentation by Energy Group, Nodes, Etana Energy, and then finally, Francis Jackson from Energy will then wrap up with his keynote takeaways from the presentations and some insights of his own, after which we have set aside about 30 minutes for our presenters to answer just some of your questions in an open discussion and Q&A session. So while the webinar and presentations are in progress, please do send your questions on the Zoom Q&A text facility. You may also put up your hands to ask questions verbally during the Q&A session. Colleagues, in his opening address, Nick van Doesburg will contextualize the webinar and give some information on the research and groundwork that is being done by Meridian Economics in the field of virtual power plants in South Africa. So without further ado, I will now introduce Nick van Doesburg, who will then deliver the opening address. So Nick, if you can put on your slides and switch on your camera and mic while I introduce you. Nick is a climate policy and energy analyst at Meridian Economics, where he works at the intersection of energy, climate, and industrial policy, with a focus on South Africa's transition towards a more competitive power market and a lower emissions electricity system. His work spans electricity market design, renewable energy integration, carbon pricing, electricity distribution industry reform, and transition pathways for emissions-intensive industries. Nick holds a master's degree in climate change and sustainable development from the University of Cape Town. So with that, over to you, Nick. We're looking forward to hearing your opening keynote presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Chris, and welcome again to all those in attendance. It's really great to be included and be able to participate in this webinar. This is a really fascinating topic, and I'm very interested to hear from the other presenters who will be presenting the work they're doing in this space. I'm just going to give a kind of a broad overview of the potential for VPPs based on some international experience. And then I'll talk a bit further about some specific work that Meridian is doing around developing a VPP roadmap for South Africa specifically. So the first, just to contextualize the kind of space where VPPs are coming into, there have been three driving trends in recent years, which are giving rise to this need for increasing flexibility on the power system. And the first is the obvious rapid growth in variable renewable resources in the grid. And just from the IEA's most recent publications on electricity, last year we saw solar PV alone met around 70% of electricity generation growth. And that's obviously leading to increasing variability and output on the grid. We also see that of that energy, distributed solar accounts for 42% of that overall PV expansion. And so you're getting this growth of distributed, not just centralized utility scale resources. And that's leading to a deepening of the duck curve as the demand profile changes. And we're also seeing significant electrification. And this is kind of this figure is really quite stark, is that the electricity demand is growing more than twice as fast as total energy demand. And that's obviously from various different elements in economies, from transport, heating, industry. They're all switching to electricity with electric vehicles and heat pumps and electric process heat. And that's leading to an intensification of peak loads, again, impacting the demand profile. So all of these factors are contributing to a rising need for flexibility, which is essentially the power system's ability to respond to variability and uncertainty in supply and demand. And VPPs have a very important role in providing flexibility to the grid by coordinating these distributed energy resources. And this includes rooftop solar PV, small-scale wind, some stationary batteries, electric vehicle batteries, and as well as geysers and other flexible loads. And the VPP aggregates all of these various resources into a centralized platform where it's able to optimize and coordinate the dispatch of those resources, which allows it to offer services to either a distribution utility or the kind of national market operator as a single power station. And these services can include demand response, so from storage by reducing or shifting consumption, through energy exports by injecting stored power onto the grid, or through ancillary services, rapid frequency response to ensure system stability. And the benefits of VPPs are numerous, and you can see in these little graphics on the left of the screen the ways in which VPPs are able to shape grid demand in various ways. Includes kind of shifting demand from high kind of peak times to other times in the day, shedding demand. If you've got CNI loads, you can just kind of reduce their consumption. Shimmying, which refers to kind of ancillary service, that fast frequency response service, and then shaping, where the overall demand profile is kind of tried to matching where generation is most abundant. And these different ways of shaping demand have numerous benefits, including transmission and distribution infrastructure relief. VPPs can essentially defer some of the grid capex by providing energy in very localized areas, reducing constraints and congestion on the grid. There's opportunity for community empowerment by enabling consumers to optimize their own energy resources and to choose the sources of that energy. And there's obviously consumer revenue that can be derived from participating within a VPP, and there are many jobs associated with that as well. Resource adequacy is also another strong benefit of VPPs. VPPs essentially, by being able to shape demand and contribute energy in certain hours, can help displace some capacity that might have previously come from gas or other sources. There's also reliability and resilience benefits. In some cases, VPPs have even been used as backup power, and they eliminate a single point of failure as well. The decarbonization and air pollution reduction benefits are obvious. A lot of these resources are either renewable from solar PV or end up displacing fossil plants, and so they can have a benefit in terms of reducing the use of fossil fuels, but they also, by making the system more flexible, they can reduce renewable curtailment by shifting demand to the middle of the day. And they're also able to address certain market and regulatory failures. For example, where tariff signals are not accurately reflective of costs, VPPs can step in as a kind of a stopgap measure to ensure that the correct price signals are relayed to consumers. And despite all these various benefits, there are nonetheless several barriers and enablers to VPP deployment. These include technical barriers, such as if there's a limited availability of these distributed resources in the first place, or if they're very high upfront costs, that can be a significant limiting factor in terms of VPP rollout. Similarly, if those various resources are unable to communicate with fragmented protocols or poor interoperability across devices, that can also make it very difficult for a VPP operator to coordinate these resources and offer them as a single service. The regulation and market access is also a potential barrier. A lot of regulations have been designed around a kind of centralized utility scale generation assumption, and often by default they exclude smaller participants in markets. Around customer enrollment, it's often difficult to get consumers themselves to recognize the potential value of participating within a VPP. They might not be able to see the value proposition. And there may also be a lack of trust and a concern around loss of control over their own assets if they're relinquishing some or all of the control of their assets to a VPP operator. Around institutional and political economy barriers, there's also the potential for powerful incumbents to resist the market entry from VPPs, as well as a lack of incentives for distribution companies to utilize VPPs, for example, to resolve certain grid constraints. And there are various enablers for each of these various constraints that can be used to unlock VPP potential. And one of the main ways of coordinating these various enablers is through roadmaps. And several countries, you can see at the bottom here, we've got Australia, Chile, the UK, Scotland, and the US have adopted either dedicated VPP roadmaps themselves, or they've embedded distributed energy resource or VPP programs within flexibility roadmaps. And these provide a coordinated pathway for unlocking the benefits of VPPs at scale. So in partnership with Integrate to Zero, Meridian is actually currently developing a VPP roadmap for South Africa. And it's very clear that South Africa has a lot of potential for VPPs. Firstly, we are all well aware of the various challenges South Africa currently faces in our electricity system, not least of which is an aging and inflexible coal fleet, which will need to retire. And in the meantime, the lack of flexibility in the coal fleet is one of the reasons for significant system curtailment of renewable resources. And in addition to kind of system curtailment issues, there's also a significant transmission and distribution challenge, with grid curtailment being another cause of a lack of access to renewables onto the grid. We also see a rapid build-out of variable renewable resources, and while this poses incredible benefits for the country and will help us decarbonize our incredibly carbon-intensive grid, it nonetheless introduces new challenges, such as balancing how do you ensure that the system remains stable with various variable generation resources coming online. And of course, we have a very aging and unreliable electricity distribution industry, where a lot of the infrastructure at the distribution level is old and hasn't been maintained and is unreliable. And VPPs can contribute to towards helping with many of these issues. And we're seeing that there's also significant potential for VPPs around underutilized resources behind the meter. For example, hot water geysers, or one of the kind of side effects of the load shedding crisis we've experienced over the past few years is that there have been a lot of batteries installed behind the meter, which now sits kind of idle unless you're in a municipality that is experiencing load reduction. But in many other cases, that's a lot of untapped potential that could potentially be utilized to a better extent. We also have the ongoing smart meter rollout from Treasury and Eskom. We have an expanding ecosystem of traders and aggregators and digitalization specialists, particularly since the lifting of the licensing requirements in 2021 and later. And these players are well positioned to facilitate the growth of VPPs in the country. We've also seen de facto VPP-like models already implemented, such as from Eskom's demand response program and Ripple relays being utilized. And as I'm sure we'll hear from various other presenters in this webinar, there are several early stage VPPs developing business models currently. And of course, we have the introduction of the SAWEM, hopefully around the corner, which will introduce a competitive wholesale electricity market where hopefully VPPs will be allowed to contribute. And one of the first steps in our roadmap is to attempt to quantify the value of VPPs in the country. And we have kind of three archetypes of VPPs that we're planning to look at. The one is an energy time shifting VPP. And this would be where demand is shifted from peak hours into other hours of the day. And examples of the kind of resources that would be included are battery storage or geysers, other flexible loads. We then have a dispatchable generation or load shedding archetype where demand is removed from peak hours and not necessarily replaced. And this can include CNI loads that are able to cost effectively shed load during periods of peak system pricing or diesel generators. And then finally, we have the release of curtailed energy as a third archetype, where curtailed energy from behind the meter solar installations can be released onto the grid. And these three macro system models capture the energy value, the capacity value, as well as some of the emission savings that can be realized from VPPs. But there is further value that exists in ancillary services and local capex deferment from the grid. To capture some of these alternative benefits, we will also be looking at developing some short and medium term business models for VPPs. And an ongoing process that we are currently busy with is to identify the key barriers and enablers particular to South Africa for enabling VPP rollout. And on the technical barriers, this can be just getting an accurate estimation of how many distributed energy resources are actually available and what proportion of these are controllable. We also have regulation and market access questions. One of the most significant ones is with the development of the SAWEM in progress, to what extent have VPPs been considered and will they be able to participate by providing power and other services in the SAWEM? Other questions are what are the barriers to feed-in, around feed-in tariffs, and to what extent does the MFMA pose a barrier to VPPs? Around customer enrollment, we're also interested in understanding to what extent customers are hesitant to relinquish their control of their assets to some extent. To what extent does the high upfront cost of the distributed energy resources in the first place constrain and limit participation of lower income households? And then to what extent can subscription services and leasing agreements be leveraged to encourage customer enrollment? And institutional and political economy barriers would be looking at to see whether VPPs are seen as a threat to municipal electricity sales and whether grid operators actually trust the reliability of VPPs as an alternative to grid build-out. And we intend to compile these various findings into a implementation plan, defining key milestones, responsible entities, and the sequence. This is not a kind of a government roadmap. It will be a roadmap that's applicable to all stakeholders, used as a guiding tool to kind of set the path forward, what needs to happen, who's to implement, and what is the correct sequence. And we very much welcome further engagement on the roadmap. We're very keen to engage with municipalities, NEDI, NERSA, ESCOM, various early stage VPP developers, and anyone else who's particularly interested. So please get in touch if you would like to contribute or share perspectives, and we can engage further. And yes, I guess onto the rest of the presentation. I'm very, very interested in listening to the other presenters, and hopefully it opens up a wider discussion on the opportunities, barriers, and actions that are needed to support VPP rollout in South Africa. So thank you very much, Chris. Back over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Nick. I think that's presented a very comprehensive and thought-provoking overview on what a VPP is, the benefits they can provide, and the studies that you are doing at this early stage to harness this resource for South Africa in order to deliver the benefits that you've outlined. So I really want to thank you for your presentation, and we're now going to move on to our first main presentation after that opening keynote, and that is from Sven Jorgen-Sonning, who is the Chief Commercial and Technology Officer at a company called Nodes in Norway. Sven has extensive experience driving growth, transformation, and innovation for the energy and flexibility sector. He is Chief Commercial and Technology Officer at Nodes, where he leads technology strategy, focusing on smart digital services and forward-looking business development. Before joining Nodes, he focused on developing novel product offerings for flexibility service providers and system operators at a vertically integrated utility in Scandinavia. In recent years, he's played a key role in expanding Nodes' flexibility services and markets across Europe, as well as spearheading transformative initiatives in Canada. Sven holds a master's degree in business administration and economics from Copenhagen Business School and Columbia University. It's great to welcome you, Sven, from Norway. We know that you've done a lot of work in this field, and there's a lot that I think we can learn from you and from people who have gone this road before us, so that we can learn from your experiences. So great pleasure to hand over to you, Sven. We're looking forward to hearing your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris, and welcome to all webinar attendees. Nodes, and I'm particularly excited to get this opportunity to share our learnings on how we are unlocking flexibility across Europe and Canada, and how this can be evaluated and used in the light of the opportunities in South Africa's energy future. So quickly on Nodes, for those that are not aware of us, we are a Norwegian technology company and one of the global leaders in providing flexibility services and solutions to system operators, both on the distribution and transmission grid, and to create a channel or a route to market for DR owners and aggregators, so all distributed energy resources essentially. We have a proven step-by-step approach to how we can establish flexibility initiatives, markets, and also a variety of different contracting frameworks so that we can ensure that there are payment mechanisms also attached to these type of VPP-like initiatives. We have an end-to-end platform for procurement, forecasting, activation, and settlement of flexibility, which includes long-term reservation contracts down to real-time energy and capacity markets, which essentially helps grid capacity usage and to integrate a variety of renewable and distributed energy resources. So in very simple terms, we can divide this ecosystem into three. We have the buyers on the illustration that you can see here on this PowerPoint slide, which consists of distribution and transmission operators on the low voltage, medium, and high voltage grid. And then you have on the other side the distributed energy resources, which I'll get back to what kind of resources that is. But essentially, they are selling their flexibility into a platform, a VPP-like type of system, which could be a market. And then we have services to facilitate for those transactions. Quickly, we are operating, as mentioned, across Europe and in Canada. We have reserved more than 3 terawatts of flexibility with long-term contracts and activated or utilized more than 7 gigawatt hours of flexibility in our markets. And as mentioned, we're sort of then bridging that gap that sits between the distribution grid and the virtual power plants or the owners of DER assets. We already heard from Nick in Meridian Economics, fantastic presentation, providing some insights to the trends in the market, challenges, and also looking into the solutions. So I'm not going to go into details of that. What we have experienced in Europe and also in North America is very similar. It is really about trying to figure out solutions for the volatile markets that are coming more frequently to our system, and grid congestions that are no longer in the transmission grid only, and for balancing markets, but also starting to see that this is coming more and more often also to the distribution grid. And similar again to Nick's presentation, what we really see, the key here is for the future is the ability to make flexibility available. What we're seeing is that this is also something that is coming more and more frequently to the agenda of grid operators and not least also regulators across Europe and North America. You might be familiar that there's a massive job that has been undertaken over the last few years in Europe, which is a project called Network Code on Demand Response. This is going to be a mandate for all member states to implement, and essentially it requires all member states to establish flexibility solutions or markets so that all system operators in all member states and all other European states are really going ahead by introducing these type of new initiatives. So why are we doing this in Europe? Well, we have some numbers. There's a lot of statistics and analysis out there, but this is an interesting one where we're seeing that by 2030, there needs to be close to 600 billions of investment into the grid, and the majority of that is actually taking place in the distribution grid. So there's a key need to find technical tools, processes, and alignment in order to then make that flexibility available to distributors so that we can actually have flexibility as an alternative to only investing in grid infrastructure. And we believe that by doing so, we can reduce the high number of investments needed by 2030. Let's take a few steps back in terms of providing you with the learnings that we have had over the years by introducing these type of technical tools, services for grid users. When we started this journey back in 2016 in Norway, we looked at this substation on the picture here, which had an overload for certain hours during the winter months. The easy way was to then do a campaign, reach out to different customers, especially C&I type of assets. And we managed to, through a collaboration with Microsoft experts from the US, reach the numbers needed and defer that grid investment. This was a type of a virtual power plant solution, but what we realized through this project was that there's a lot of mechanisms that sits around which are more market-based, which requires us to look at the market design, which requires us to find in different payment structures, mechanisms, and also put the customer first. Customer choice in the process of making flexibility available is key. So when we evolved in 2018 with the support of Nord Pool, independent energy wholesale market, we realized that there's also some concepts around that independent market operator that could be utilized for the distribution grid. So we started to then develop different type of products, services that resembles a lot of the mechanisms that we see in a wholesale market, only offering that to the distribution grid so that they can access flexibility resources. Again, a learning that we've made over that 6-year period is that the distributors that are operating the distribution and transmission grid isn't necessarily ready to implement a full-blown market from the outset. A reason for that is also being mentioned by Nick in his presentation, that there's a need to then grow liquidity over time. So rather than focusing on all the mechanisms around the market, it is really about enabling flexibility procurement. And if we look at what that really entails, it is about creating frameworks, creating different type of products and services that can allow the distribution companies to actually access that flexibility. So what we're seeing prevailing is that there's a need for reservation and activation type of product. So from long term, where we have contracts years ahead, months ahead, weeks ahead, to close to real-time markets, whether being day ahead and intraday type of solutions. And it's not only by creating these product frameworks, but it's also all about looking at the holistic picture. So how can we coordinate flexibility procurement with existing mechanisms or markets, whether it's being reserve or balancing markets by the transmission system operator, or if it is wholesale markets being driven in different countries. And then on top of these more market-based type of products, we need to have also some more rule-based mechanisms. So we have seen that flexible connection agreements, which is an agreement that is made available for those that are applying to be connected to the grid. So you can be connected to the grid on the condition of being flexible in the way that you consume energy. And this is a different type of product that is needed, along with the interruptible tariffs that I'm sure that you are well aware of. So in the main active markets that we are currently operating, there are different ways of utilizing these services. If we look at Euroflex in Norway, we have a national initiative with 7 DSOs collaborating on how they can access flexibility. This creates this sort of semi-centralized approach creates a program and a mechanisms that is a country-wide spend, which makes it easier for aggregators and those that own DERs to participate in the market. It's a fantastic initiative which has grown year by year. I'll get back to some figures on that and tell you more about our experiences. In Sweden, we've seen 2 local grid companies, Gothenburg Energy and Mölndal Energy, doing a fantastic job in their customer outreach programs, which have managed to provide them with installed capacity that can also reduce their grid cost to the overlaying grid. They're doing an incredible job with the industries in that region. And Fluvius, they're doing the same thing. They're building up their installed capacity to meet the challenges that they currently face, as well as the one that they're expecting for the future. And they have reached record numbers over the last years in installed capacity and are trading now based on grid needs. In Hydro One in Canada, they have a different approach. Rather than focusing on market solutions, they are focusing on flexibility as a non-wire solution, meaning that they are looking to explore how much flexibility that could be utilized in different pockets of the grid as an alternative to grid investments. And this is a program that is directly meeting the mandate of the regulator in Ontario, and providing them with a solution for the future, and also currently to explore the potential of flexibility. In FinFlex, we are working with the TSO, FinGrid, and with the DSO of the capital in the country, where we are not only looking at local services, but we are aligning and coordinating flexibility procurement between the distribution and transmission grid. So this is a program where we are giving access to new markets while also ensuring that one market or one and also procurement and the distribution grid aren't then creating challenges for existing markets in the transmission grid. And the big question in all of these initiatives is how much flexibility can we make available, and who is actually, what are the resources that can provide us flexibility? So we see a wide range of different categories, everything from demand response from industrial, commercial, and residential participants, electric mobility, energy storage, heating, dispatchable generation, and aggregated resources, including VPP like of aggregated solution. I heard from Chris that he was very interested in learning more about EV chargers as one example, and I guess that is coming from the massive growth in Norway, where more than 90% of new cars sold are electrical, which has been a fantastic journey over the last years. We've had thousands of transactions with EV chargers in our markets in Norway and in other countries, Belgium alike. We've seen that it provides value to an extent, but it's also providing value alongside tariff solutions. So in some countries, we've seen that the shift through tariff solutions have managed to shift the load from peak hours during the day to night hours. But in other countries, we're still seeing that they're not able to shift that load curve from the middle of the day. So there's a need to have these type of products also for EV chargers. I had to bring in a picture of your fantastic stadium in Cape Town in the middle of this slide, because it's a representation of the type of industrial players that might have some idle capacity in the form of either backup generators or batteries that could not only provide flexibility value into reserve and balancing markets, but also into local markets, municipal-owned DSOs, and those that are operating in the lower level of the grid. And with Norway doing so well in the World Cup, I had to also then have an example from a football stadium. It's super exciting, and I would have loved to see South Africa meeting us, but maybe another year. So how can we incentivize participation for these distributed energy or resources aggregators and those that own the assets? Well, we believe that there's a need to have long-term reservation contracts where you, as an owner of these resources, can get paid for being available. We need to have near real-time activation markets where you can get paid when you reduce or increase your consumption. We've also seen that there are some loads that doesn't necessarily work well with the prediction, as it is a stochastic type of DER. So for this, we're creating a virtual fuse where you're getting paid for keeping your consumption on or generation below a certain agreed limit. And then on top of these type of products, where, as mentioned, we also need to have different type of rule-based activation and more control of renewable energy sources and distributed energy resources. So then you can gain grid access, for example, or a tariff discount by being available for curtailment when needed. I mentioned that I have some statistics from our market in Norway. And if you look at this slide, you see the transactions that have taken place month by month in the Norwegian flexibility market for distribution system operators. As you can see, it was fairly low back in October 2024. The reason for that was first and foremost because of a gap between a program that had run prior to this until a new program started. That is a challenge in itself, that you do all of these projects or programs, you stop it, then you lose the engagement from those that can offer flexibility. You need to sort of rebuild that trust. You need to rebuild those processes, and it takes more time. So consistency without these stops in the DER type of program is key to success. But what we've seen also is that as we have managed to rebuild that trust with the communities, with those that are offering the distributed energy resource and flexibility, we've seen that the volumes are suddenly starting to grow, especially now during the seasonal winter, which is the high month for procuring flexibility in the Norwegian market. And another reason for this is that we are agnostic to what type of DERs and assets, flexibility assets, that are offering flexibility into the grid. And we have had a very collaborative approach where we're identifying, testing, and scaling customer flexibility. And it's not only about inviting in traditional aggregators, those that are already operating in other markets, but we also need to look at new flexibility service providers, direct industrial owners that have the technical capabilities to offer direct into a market, or those that maybe need just a commercial middle layer to offer into a market. So customer engagement, to understand their willingness, their capability and barriers to participation, is key to get this growth rate. And the combination of long-term contracts with clear pricing mechanisms and short-term activation markets is also been a success for seeing the growth in the Norwegian market, as an example. Not going to go into full details of this, but I'm going to give you a brief introduction to a study that has been done by myself and a few others in the Norwegian market, where we're trying to give sort of a contextualized view and also a playbook on how other countries can use our learnings when they are embarking on a journey of establishing flexibility markets. In short, we have divided that into 4 phases: a foundational phase, enabling the DSO to make the decision to use local flexibility markets, how they are setting up a market, how they're operating a market, and what they do, what kind of activities sits within the post-trade phase. The main roles and responsibilities sits within 3 categories, at least in the Norwegian market. And we see this as also being prevalent in a lot of European countries and in Canada. You have the National Regulatory Authority, which has a key role in facilitating for these type of initiatives. You have system operators, both on the distribution and transmission grid. And you have a concept of procuring SO if there's a system operator procuring on behalf of, for example, a municipal utility. And then you have the ones that are offering flexibility to the market, which is the service providers. And then you have national differences in terms of other parties that are highly relevant. Again, this is maybe a complex slide, but it's our best try in trying to sort of give an overview of all the activities that are important within each phase to establish markets. So don't get hung up in the details here, but rather see this as an overview that you can look into if you want to read more about this. You see, again, activities per phase and some activities that are cross-cutting across in different phases. But the key here is to get started, to get real experience. It's always important to look into the crystal ball to see where are we heading. So what is the direction of travel for the energy industry in the countries? And based on our experience, if you take away the flex market green box in the middle of this illustration, you see how the energy market is operating in a lot of European and Canadian countries today. You don't necessarily have a market or a VPP for the distribution companies. This is the key to then tap into that missing part, provide them with access to flexibility from DERs. But while we are also offering that access to the distribution companies, utilities, municipal utilities, we also need to ensure that there's an alignment with the existing markets in the transmission grid, the reserve markets, as well as the wholesale markets, day ahead and intraday markets. So if I look 5 years ahead, I really would love to see an integrated market design being developed across countries. But for some, we need to just start with simple initiatives. So why is really flexibility so important? Well, it's important to get started, and we need to enable faster connections of renewables, and it is really about deferring or avoiding costly grid investments in essence. So if you want to learn more about what we are doing in Europe and in other countries, if you're eager to look into the solutions, please get in touch with me, and then we'll set up something post this fantastic webinar. I'm really looking forward to hearing from the other participants in this group, as I do see that we have a lot of actors from different parts of the ecosystem. So with that, thank you so much, and back to you, Chris.
Thank you, Sven. Really, I think you've met the task admirably, giving us a clear indication of what is happening in Northern Europe, in Canada, and the opportunities and potential that it offers, for us. And what's important is that we can learn from others. We don't need to we can reinvent the wheel, but we can take what works for us and develop it for our own particular needs. But I think one should always be cognizant of those that have gone before. It's sometimes useful not to be a technology leader, to be a follower, of what really has proven to work, and how we can adapt it for our own needs. So thanks very much indeed, Sven, for agreeing to participate and joining us from Norway. It's wonderful to have this technology that can bring experts from around the world, into our offices, into our homes. Thank you indeed. So now we're going to move to our next presenter. And it's a great pleasure to introduce to you Jason Fairhurst, who's a director at the Energy Group. Jason, if I can ask you to please switch on your camera and mic and share your presentation while I introduce you. Jason is Director of Energy Group Advisory, where he specializes in renewable energy, battery energy storage systems, and energy solutions for mining, industrial, and commercial energy users. With more than 10 years of experience in the renewable energy sector, he has led the strategy formulation and development of over 1 gigawatt of power solutions for large energy users. Combining an engineering background with expertise in energy modeling, project finance, and commercial structuring, Jason helps clients evaluate and implement energy strategies that improve resilience, reduce costs, and support decarbonization. Jason holds a master's degree, cum laude, in mechanical engineering from Stellenbosch University in South Africa. So great to have you, Jason. We can see your first slide, and I'm now going to hand over to you for your presentation. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Chris. And thanks for everybody that's joining us on the meeting today, and also to the fellow panelists. Already a lot of interesting information. So yeah, I'm Jason Fairhurst, as Chris just said, from Energy Group. Our key focus is developing, funding, and operating large-scale energy infrastructure or energy projects on site for large power users. If I just want to condense the hopefully relatively simple messaging that I'd like to take everyone through today, is the key points raised here on the opening slide, which is the incentive on the market is shifting. I think a lot of that's been covered by Sven and Nick as well, so I won't spend too much time there. Then looking at the value of VPPs and on-site batteries today, and that they're already bankable, and then looking at what the value offers tomorrow. I think through our experience in developing these kind of projects, we've also started to obviously build a lot of expertise, understanding on how these things fit together for large power users, and that's also then led into an advisory role that we've built out. And I think with all the interesting complexities and changes coming to our market, we are finding this advisory becoming quite a big part of what we do as well. So just, looking at the headline there, that's really what we're seeing, is that large loads, a lot of mines and large power users are in our view moving from price takers and really just kind of consumers to these active participants in the market. And I think virtual power plants is going to play a major role in unlocking that and the opportunities that come with it. So yeah, this slide is looking at the incentives and how they've changed and how that changes the market. I love the saying, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. That's really what drives us, what drives how the market's developed. And I think, as I mentioned, the other participants, panelists have already touched on this. So I'm not going to spend too much time there. But what we've seen and how this has developed over time in South Africa and abroad is, you know, at the beginning of pre-1990s, was very focused on energy. Then there was time of use that was introduced, but quite a static time of use structure. If we think about the two kind of seasons that we look at, we then moved into a demand and capacity incentivization. So, you know, I think us mechanical engineers love the water pipe analogy. If energy is the water flowing through the pipe, the demand and the capacity is then paying for how big does that pipe need to be. And now we're moving into the dynamic timing incentivization area, which again, the panelists have covered well, which is you are going to be rewarded for your ability to understand, manage, control your timing at quite a high time resolution. And then just the last little line there, what's quite interesting from a moment in time and our market is that a lot of markets have already moved through this abroad and a few decades ago when PV and wind and battery pricing was still, they hadn't moved through the cost curve. Where we sit today, especially with batteries, you know, which is obviously the focus of my talk today, is that they have moved about, you know, 90% down the cost curve since 2010, and we still see them falling, which opens up some very interesting opportunities for on-site battery development. This slide is looking at what are the opportunities that are opening up both today and tomorrow in terms of the movement in the market. So down the left-hand side, I spoke to just briefly before, large power users today, if they don't have on-site generation or batteries, they're really a kind of a cost taker, and they don't have much participation in the market. And then if we add batteries to that site, we enable a flexibility in terms of their consumption profile. And even today, and we'll get into that on the next slide, we're seeing attractive rates of return in terms of arbitrage. And that is not buying and selling energy in the conventional sense, but as a large consumer, you are buying energy at a lower price and then reducing your energy consumption when the pricing is high, effectively allowing for that arbitrage saving. What is looking in the value of tomorrow, what's coming through, you know, and there's obviously a lot of discussion about this and how these mechanisms are going to work, but we'll have day and intraday trading. Again, arbitrage is obviously applicable there. And then if we look at what does a distributed virtual power plant allow for, as mentioned just previously, there's going to be a lot of value on understanding your energy and being able to forecast. And you will be rewarded for forecasting well and penalized for forecasting badly. And this is also phrased here as balancing or imbalancing on the network. And we're going to look at how can a aggregation of different various sites, how can that play a role in assisting you in your forecasting and your imbalancing and balancing a bit later on in the presentation. And then another aspect which this distributed VPP would unlock is being able to take part in the grid ancillary services. And that is because these grid ancillary services, which have again been discussed, have a certain threshold. I believe at the moment it's being discussed around 50 megawatts of being able to take part in those grid ancillary services. So if you only have, you know, a few small sites, they might not be able to take part, but if you aggregate them together, then your ability to take part in those services increases. Again, this 30% IRR, we have modeled everything under the sun, looking at markets abroad and trying to predict. Of course, these frameworks are not, the numbers themselves are not yet in, so you can't draw a line under that 30%. But the value today we're quite confident on, because that is actually running in the framework and the economics of today. Let me jump into some maybe some more fun stuff here with an interactive slide. We've taken some of our real modeling data and pulled it in to this slide to almost try and exhibit what do I mean by the value of today, and how on-site batteries for large power users can play a major role. What we're looking at here is a 24-hour graph, which is basically going to be an average of energy throughout the day. We've actually coined this internally as Jay's favorite graph, because it really is, but I'm sure it's a lot of people's favorite graph as well. So what it is basically, I'm going to just bring up a shape that everybody recognizes. I mean, this is me putting on additional megawatts in this scenario of solar. Here's our megawatts. Here's the solar throughout the day. Here we can see our time of use. This is a blended over the year. And so this gives us a good understanding of what's happening over 24 hours. This blue line is basically the net position of that site. On the right-hand side here, we have some metrics, the loads. Just to mention, this is an aggregation of 6 operations. It's an aggregate view, and an aggregation of generation sources as well. We've got a generation, we've got some penetration, we've got some oversupply, we've got some savings, an MPV. And then what we're really interested in to see is what are the batteries, how are they playing a role? So let me just reset that and bring batteries in today on a standalone basis. So this is the standalone battery arbitrage case, which we talk about the value of today and actually banking this infrastructure for large power users. So here you can see you charge during the evenings, you discharge during the mornings, charge during the daytime, and discharge during the evenings again, having the resultant net load that you can see with the bottom line, with the IRR of around 27%. Obviously, there's many factors that play a role here. This is an indicative. It is using real data and real economic assumptions for today, but it's obviously illustrative. Every project has its own specifics. So that's the battery case. Let me just reset here. Another interesting case is what we're seeing on a lot of our client sites is that you have some behind the meter on-site generation. You also have some wheeled energy coming in. Let's put that at 90, wheeled PV. And then you also have some wheeled wind joining in the mix. Now, we today live in what is called the monthly reconciliation world, which means that at the end of the month, your energy bill is reconciled on a monthly basis, which allows you some flexibility. You can see here that we actually have some protrusion of energy during the middle of the day, but the oversupply, which is this pink, is relatively small. Now, that is because we have this mechanism currently in the frame called net billing, which allows you to net this oversupply off at the end of the month against areas which you were still drawing from the grid, which are these kind of areas here. Now, what's been quite publicized, that we all kind of as an industry know at one point when we go to the market, the SAWEM market, we will go onto an hourly basis. And what that does is puts quite a lot of pressure, especially on the middle of the daytime, where we see quite a high penetration in terms of solar. And what we've working with now with clients and looking to implement is, if you add batteries to this scenario, you basically will see that middle of the day charge increase, of course, and then distribute out to the wider area. Under this scenario, as you can see, we because you're using energy that would either have been basically lost or have to be sold at a discount, you can get quite attractive IRRs on this application, around upwards of 30%. So lots of triggers, and I'll leave the graphs there for now. Something that we love to work with and to visualize. I hope the message kind of landed. So that was about value of today, bankable on today. The next is looking at what is the value of tomorrow of on-site batteries. As mentioned before, the ability to forecast and the ability to understand exactly what's happening on your energy mix on an hourly basis in the future is going to become the main, one of the main incentivizations. This is we've seen in external markets as well. What is this graph? This graph on the left here is showing that forecasting is difficult. There is no magic crystal ball, unfortunately. We have to use data and mathematics and insights to build out our forecasts. But physics does what physics wants, and we also have operations in the mix that you try and tell a mind, tell me exactly what you're going to do tomorrow. It unfortunately doesn't work like that. So you can see the forecasting accuracy decreasing as you have to forecast further ahead. Here we've got the accuracy of the load, of the solar, of the wind, and then the net load, which just basically saying it's very difficult to do high accuracy long-term forecasting. So, but you obviously will have to do it. But there are other mechanisms you can use to increase your accuracy and decrease your risks. So what do we mean? What are these risks? So in the market that's coming, we envisage that you will submit a day-ahead schedule. You are then settled in real time on any deviation on that forecast. The gap is the imbalance, and that's the cost which you will pay. If you have under forecast, you will pay a premium on that energy that you need to use. And if you over forecast, you will have to sell that energy at a discount. So what we're seeing in some of broad markets is that penalization for under forecasting can be 2 to 5 times the cost of the traded day value. So it's an important aspect to get right. And then here we're just looking at what the actual basically day ahead load for a site that this data we're looking at is real data from some of our clients of mines. It's about 20% variation. That's just the natural volatility of the operation. So I want to now jump into 2 key drivers which VPPs and batteries can assist you with. So I think I think Sven had touched on it briefly, is that this concept of a balancing zone. We will have the ability to put certain BESS plants and load centers into a zone, as shown here, operation A, B, and C, depending on their geographical location. What this enables is an aggregation of those load sites, which allows just statistically improved stability and your ability to forecast. As mentioned previously, the scale of this zone also allows you, improves your ability to take part in the energy market. And as mentioned many times now, the smart portfolio control allows you to optimize your energy costs. And just on the top there, why on site behind the meter for batteries? We believe this is really important because the savings on those batteries is behind the meter. There's no wheeling or use of system charge on the chain. There's a reduction in cost from a wheeling point of view. The control is majorly important because that battery needs to be able to almost instantaneously react to what the load is on that site. And so sitting kind of right embedded almost next to the load there is really, really important. And then also, if you want to look at reducing your peak demand, it also needs to sit there so that your instantaneous peak load at that site can be decreased. And I'm going to step into some more visuals. This is trying to show visually that statistical reduction in volatility, as I mentioned. This is a volatility on the left-hand side of one of the sites. It's 19%. And as you add more sites into that, you can see that just the statistical nature of the variability starts to cancel, and you start reducing your volatility. I'll just add a few more sites here. It is diminishing returns, but it does almost basically half your volatility just by the grouping. Now, you still have 10% risk there that you need to manage. So we've also looked at modeling adding batteries. So here's our residual, let's say, risk. And here we've modeled adding battery sizes to this portfolio. We're moving the slider up now to 125, 130, 145, and we get to around 170 megawatt hours distributed over these sites with smart optimization and response, we can bring that deviation from your forecast down significantly, and basically try get it to 0%, which will be tricky, but that is, and that will all be based on the ability of your BESS to respond in that moment. But we believe we can get it close to 0 to 1%. So just to wrap up then, I guess the last message here is, what does the timeline look like on implementing these kind of projects? We would start always with measuring, modeling, iterating that model whilst developing those projects in parallel. What does that mean? That's getting the right license and permits and license in place, getting the right pricing in place, building out financial models, and getting to an acceptable bankable level position. We then have the COD window, which is between 12 and 24 months from starting today, depending on what the complexities of that project are. We then look at that aggregation and portfolio balancing modeling we just showed, and how to make sure that when the market arrives, that is all up and running. And the last point there is just where that SAWEM program currently sits. Is we envision large power users to be starting to participate in the middle of next year. So basically the message is here, the stuff doesn't happen, these things don't happen overnight, and there is a bit of urgency required to get going. Just to round off, the key takeaways: the market is changing. Incentives are increasingly rewarding smart energy management. We think the winners will be operations that understand the energy mix and can control it. We think on-site batteries play a pivotal role, and they actually pay for themselves today under today's economics. And again, these projects don't happen overnight, so there's some urgency around it. I think my final slide is just a splash of some of our projects we're busy with, and we've currently got 800 megawatt hours of BESS that we're moving through procurement. So if you're interested in any of this, please again reach out. With that, Chris, I will then wrap up and say again, thank you very much, and again, thanks for the panelists for the efforts, and looking forward to the rest of the presentations.
Yeah, well, that was Jason Fairhurst of the Energy Group, and I found it to be a fascinating presentation indeed. I loved your graph, the ability to model different opportunities, the two graphs that you presented, I mean, showing how battery energy storage can really reduce the volatility of demand, especially when done aggregated over several sites, to get that benefit. The statistical benefit that it keeps the volatility down as well, and then adding the batteries to it can get it to a highly predictable demand, which is exactly what you want if you want to be a market participant. So I thought it was a great presentation, Jason. You did us proud, and thank you for your efforts. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now 8 minutes past 11. I'm going to call a comfort break now till 11:20. That's 12 minutes comfort break. So please don't run away. After the comfort break, we're going to have two fantastic presentations. One by Evan Rice, who's the CEO of Etana, and one by John Cornick, who is the CEO of Plentify. These are going to be presenting some really interesting projects that are happening. This is not theory. This is what is really happening in the VPP sector, explaining the challenges as well as the opportunities. So don't run away, and please, can you be back here at 20 minutes past 11, 11:20 exactly. We're going to restart. So with that, I'm calling this comfort break, and see you at 11:20. Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's exactly 20 minutes past 11, and welcome back to the second half of this webinar, where we've got two great further presentations, as well as a wrap-up And this promises to be really interesting, down to earth, and practical. So I'm going to now introduce you to our next speaker, Evan Rice, who is the CEO of Etana Energy. And Evan, if you can share your presentation, switch on your camera and mic. While I introduce you, Evan is the CEO of Etana Energy, a licensed energy trader that supplies wheeled renewable energy to business customers in South Africa. Evan has 20 years of experience in the energy and clean tech sectors in South Africa and Europe, working at the leading edge of the global energy transition in more liberalized electricity markets and rapidly decarbonizing power systems. He previously headed up Tesla's energy business for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. He was the CEO at Green Cape and a consultant at McKinsey. Evan has a BCom law degree and a BCom honors degree in advanced management studies, both from the University of the Witwatersrand. So thank you very much for joining us, Evan. I see your presentation is showing and your camera is on, so it's over to you. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Chris. Great to have the opportunity to participate here today. I think it's a really, really exciting topic. We're obviously in the midst of a massive amount of reform in the electricity sector in South Africa and globally. Great to get the chance to be able to share a little bit about what we're doing as aggregators in this space, given the playing field today. As Chris said, my name is Evan Rice. I'm the CEO at Etana. We're a licensed electricity trader in SA. Effectively, we supply renewable energy to large power users, large and medium power users through the grid using wheeling in SA. We buy all the power from large renewable energy projects, and we put together solutions for customers that meet their needs for decarbonization, price certainty, and ultimately savings. We're currently supplying customers in Eskom, City of Cape Town, and Nelson Mandela Bay Metro networks. We've got 5 megawatts in operation that we're wheeling today, and we've got over 500 megawatts in construction. A slightly different angle, I guess, on the VPP topic today. It's less about flexibility, given that there's, I guess, limited current programs available for providers of demand-side flexibility or prosumers to participate in a market, but rather about how, by thinking about aggregating both generation as well as demand, licensed traders like ourselves are building some of these foundations for VPPs and using some of these concepts from VPPs to already create value and manage risk for both customers and ourselves. So I guess the problem we set out to solve was a few years ago, was when we were in the midst of heavy load shedding, was how can we help unlock new generation capacity onto the grid by utilizing the current wheeling frameworks available in South Africa. We obviously didn't have an electricity market at the time, and we still don't, although SAWIM is coming. But it's going to be a phased rollout, and really, I guess we were using the tools and the mechanisms that we had available at the time to see how we could contribute to stabilizing the electricity system and deliver value to customers. Key to that is obviously figuring out how can we create a value proposition for customers that's really compelling. And that meant both high value, low risk, and at the same time finding ways that we could mitigate the risk that we were able to take on behalf of customers. But also thinking about over the long term, how do we ensure that what we're creating is resilient value and robust value for customers and for ourselves, because the electricity sector is changing super dynamically, and I think some of the other presenters today have already started talking around some of the changes that we're starting to see, and that are certainly coming within the next couple of years. Initially, I think the deals that were done once the market opened up for private generators and private customers 4 years ago in SA were largely these really, really large power users that were buying the entire output of a wind or solar farm. but to figure out ways of how we could actually expand that addressable market and build more capacity in the country. We needed to figure out how we could bring smaller customers, smaller loads into the mix. And obviously, you want to be covering as much of the customer load as possible to be giving them maximum value and have the ability to effectively build more megawatts on the grid. Customers also looking for contractual flexibility, and they want to take as little risk as possible. Energy is not their primary business, and entering into long-term contracts to get best value means they're only willing to do that if their risks are largely mitigated. So that is effectively, I guess, the problem statement that we started with in the business, and that we've been iterating on over time to figure out how we can continue to improve the value proposition. So, I mean, I guess one of the things we wrestled with really, really early on was to figure out, what are we dealing with here? A lot of customers, and it makes sense for any customer that's got land or roof space available to put behind the meter solar onto their operations if they've got daytime load. And it also makes sense for people to purchase as much solar as they can, because solar is the lowest cost generation technology today. However, what we very quickly, saw here is that if you're looking at a single customer, single generator PPA, whether that's behind the meter or on a wheeled basis, it results in some suboptimal load coverage, as well as inevitable risk that's got to get allocated to someone around potential excess energy that cannot be utilized by that customer. So there's multiple different mismatches here. Firstly, the scale of demand, especially as you get to smaller and smaller customers, they can't take the output of a whole plant. Secondly, you've got this shape mismatch. Now, these graphs are obviously massive illustrative oversimplifications of a perfect sunny day and a relatively flat customer load or stable load. In reality, these things are both much more volatile than that. But what you see, even in a very, very illustrative, simplified graph, is that you've got this problem, and I think Jason illustrated this on the previous graph really well, around if a solar plant is producing its full output and you've optimized this to a load, you're generally going to end up with some excess. Solar is obviously fairly predictable in terms of when it's going to produce, but there is variability intraday. And is it a cloudy day? Is it the seasonal differences? Wind is much more variable, but actually covers many more hours of the day. And so, you really have to think about how can you solve this for customers by looking at a mix of solutions over time. I guess the third mismatch here is customers typically are not willing or super interested in entering into 20-year contracts, but you need to contract at those tenors to get the PPA prices to the most competitive levels to give most value to customers. So when you put these things together, what you see is ultimately solving this on a bilateral basis or a single technology solution for a customer leaves value on the table. It creates risk, that creates contracting friction, and ultimately that results in less capacity ultimately getting deployed. So we needed to figure out ways to solve around these constraints. There's two other looming changes that are going to significantly impact the value of renewable energy supply. A lot of this is already happening. We're seeing this from experience elsewhere around the globe. I think Jason also referred to the first year, which is this shift from our monthly time of use-based reconciliation for wheeling to an hourly recon. What we see at the moment is, in particular for solar, you're able to utilize those shoulders in standard time when solar isn't producing to cram in solar that is produced during the middle of the day. And what you're going to see when we go from monthly to hourly recon is a significant drop of the load coverage that you get purely from solar for a customer, because they won't be able to use that solar in the middle of the day above their load. That's going to significantly impact value that customers might get. And if they're entering into an agreement on a 10 or 15-year basis and hourly recon comes in with SAWAM in the next year or two, that's obviously putting that value significantly at risk. I think the second one is more global phenomenon that we can see has already happened in South Australia and California and Hawaii and other places where there's been very high solar penetration. That's already taken place in the grid, and this is, Ronald Murray's now famous buffalo curve. We don't have the duck curve in South Africa, but the buffalo curve that the system operator is already experiencing, where we're just seeing more and more solar that's coming onto the grid. We know how much was deployed behind the meter, during the time of load shedding. There's a lot of large-scale plants in construction at the moment and coming online. Almost every quarter we're seeing hundreds of megawatts being connected. So the inevitable impact of this is that you end up here, given the prevalence of energy during the middle of the day, that you're going to see an inversion of the current time of use value buckets. So currently, daytime is standard time in South Africa. It's got, I guess, mid-priced power. Mornings and evenings, we've got peak times, and then overnight we've got off-peak overnight and some of the weekends. What we're likely to see is that standard and off-peak value buckets invert, and you're going to see abundant, lower-priced energy during the middle of the day due to excess solar, which is already being significantly curtailed in the system. And you're going to see probably more expensive power overnight due to us having to continue to run power plants overnight. The system operator in South Africa, it was also referred to earlier, we've got very limited flexibility in the grid today. We've got some pumped hydro, we've got OCGTs, which are really expensive. There is some battery capacity in construction currently out of the ESIP program, and there's some demand response programs, but really our coal fleet is so inflexible that the system operator just cannot turn those plants offline during the middle of the day when we've got lots of solar producing, and that's resulting in curtailment. So we need to think about this, especially in light of customers wanting to contract for 3 years or 5 years or perhaps 10 years, whereas as an aggregator you're buying power on a longer term than that. Is what is going to be the value of that energy that you're procuring over time? How does that evolve, and how are you going to manage that risk in the tail end of those PPA years when your customer PPAs roll off? So effectively, how have we gone about thinking about solving this? I guess the key here is really the power of the portfolio. And again, I think Jason's already alluded to this, just showing how if you bring multiple different plants together, how you reduce that volatility. You can add storage into the mix as well and further reduce it. So the same thing happens really in terms of just customer loads, right? This isn't just around forecasting, but building up a customer portfolio with some 24/7 operations, mining customers, data centers and the like. You're adding in manufacturing facilities that might work single or double shift, but not work weekends necessarily. Then you've got a whole bunch of other commercial buildings, office blocks, shopping centers. The more of this that you put together, the flatter profile you get, or the more stable profile. And then against that profile, you're building up a generator profile to be able to try and match that as closely as you can. But on the generation side, really important to think about this mix of wind and solar so that you can cover more and more of your customers' loads. And ultimately then thinking about batteries to be able to hit more of those high value periods, and thinking around how can you mitigate some of that risk over time of the shifting value on an hourly basis of energy from what it is today. So we're seeing solar delivering really compelling returns to customers today against Megaflex. But as that shifts, as the dynamics of the energy mix shift, it's likely that value will get eroded, and you're going to have to think about how can you protect that value for your customers, or how do you manage that risk that you're taking on as an aggregator with a supply portfolio that you've committed to in the long term. Moving to more kind of, I guess, practically how we're thinking about this, and from operating wheeled plants and very soon operating multiple generators that we'll be putting into a portfolio to allocate to our customers. We've had to think about building our systems, which we see really as, I guess, the first layer of a VPP. Effectively, obviously, we're pulling the metering points in from all of our generators and all of our customers. We're looking at forecasting data that's coming in on both sides of supply and demand. We're obviously building our portfolio based on longer term forecasts, but we're getting down to nearer term forecasts as we move towards a market. And then what we're doing is really monitoring that in real time, looking at how we can allocate that power most effectively. And ultimately, this will even feed into real-time allocation and dispatch of BESS or other sources of flexibility that we might be able to tap into on the customer side. And all of that leads us to less or lower excess risk, covering higher percentage of our customers' demand and therefore able to give them higher value and really better risk management, real time, but ultimately also in the long term for an aggregator. One practical example of what we've had to do to try and solve some limitations has been the recent pooled wheeling pilot with the city of Cape Town. So the city, unlike Eskom's monthly time of use wheeling reconciliation, the city's wheeling framework requires actually settlement on a half hour period in each half hour, each 30-minute period of the day and of the month. This is obviously a lot more restrictive, but it's a really solid test case for us as we move towards what is inevitably at least an hourly reconciliation and hourly settlement period once SOAN comes in South Africa. The challenge that we experience here is, well, firstly, municipal electricity billing platforms were never designed with wheeling in mind. And when you start to implement this on a really granular level, like 30-minute time matching and having to apply credits for oversupply, undersupply, the billing reconciliation gets super complex really, really quickly. And those systems don't exist. So building them from scratch is going to take time. This is never going to be the number one priority of any municipality in the country. We've got lots of other, I guess, system and IT challenges and other priorities that each of them will be solving for. On the other end of the equation, if you cannot allocate energy in each settlement period dynamically in different proportions, you end up with a lot of inflexibility and suboptimal load coverage and lots of excess. Right? So that's not an outcome that's really compelling for our clients. It's not compelling for us. We end up with excess risk that we don't want to really take on. And we needed to find a way to more dynamically manage the situation to improve scalability, and ultimately to create more value for our customers. So the solution that we came up with, working closely with the city of Cape Town here, was to effectively create a single virtual end user. We combine all of our contracted customers' energy demand into a single customer, and that allows us to do a single reconciliation on a 30-minute basis from a pooled generation portfolio against this pooled customer portfolio. The city effectively bills Etana at the end of the month for whatever wasn't supplied by Etana to that customer pool. And in turn, we manage the allocations dynamically and bill our customers for what we supplied and what the city of Cape Town supplied. This is our core business. we're building these platforms, obviously, to be able to manage this dynamically in real time. And it means that we can provide simpler billing, both to the city, for the city, as well as for our customers. But more importantly, we can dynamically manage the risk of oversupply, undersupply, and gives us a great test case to be able to see how our portfolio will hold up in a more granular settlement period environment, as we're likely to see very soon when the SAWM comes in. So we're delighted to say that we completed the first wheeling under this pooled environment a few months ago. Things have been going really well, and within the next month or two, we'll be adding additional generators into that portfolio and building up that customer pool further now that we've tested it and everything's working nicely. I'm not going to belabor the point here because I think everyone that's spoken before me has kind of highlighted what's needed. But I think I guess the key point and learning from our side has been really around, we know the system's going to need flexibility going forward. To be able to do this locally within distribution networks is actually going to be incredibly valuable to the system as a whole, to avoid unnecessary grid build out. But the experience of just dealing with different networks, municipalities, billing systems, tells us this is probably going to take us quite a while in South Africa to get to the point that we're going to be able to do this at a massively distributed level. And I think we've got to get going and look at pilot programs and get some successes on the board. But one of the absolutely critical layers that we've got to get going from the outset and focused on at national level is to make sure that we're getting a data management platform in place in parallel with the SAWM, that billing meters, the data from that is made available in real time, and that we're putting a standardized approach in place to billing measurement, so that as these markets get created through the SAWM or at the distributor level, it's all being done on a consistent basis. Otherwise, there's no chance we're going to be able to scale. There's a lot that can be done. I think customers are willing to invest in flexible resources and become much more active participants in the grid. And there's multiple service providers you've heard from today that are building really, really great platforms and technology to enable this. But there's a lot of building blocks that still aren't in place, and we got a long way to go. And that's pretty much it from my side, Chris. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, Evan. It was really a privilege to interact with somebody who is grappling at a really practical level, grappling with the real issues on the ground to put in place, solutions still have to be piloted, still have to be proven. But it's good to see companies like Etana putting in this kind of effort. And we're going to hear more about this in our next presentation. So thanks so much to Evan. It's been great to hear from you and your project in Cape Town. Really, I think, engaging in some of the really hard issues and coming up with an interesting solution where you can aggregate a number of customers into a single customer with a single set of billing reconciliation, which is really going to be helpful for the city of Cape Town. So we're now going to move to our next presentation before the wrap-up, and that is John Cornick, who's the CEO of Plentify. John, if you can share your presentation and switch on your camera and mic. John is the CEO and co-founder of Plentify, a home energy management company and virtual power plant platform. With a background in energy, technology, and finance, John drives large-scale impact in the renewable energy sector. Before founding Plentify, he led Google's energy business in Africa, funding some of the continent's largest wind and solar farms, whilst also leveraging and developing technology to expand energy access. He has also served as an independent energy consultant, helping governments and corporations implement sustainable financing mechanisms and climate initiatives. John holds a master's degree in business administration from Columbia University and a master's degree in finance from the University of Cape Town. And he is an Echoing Green Fellow and Tutu Fellow. Really good to see you again and have you on this webinar. And I'm fascinated to hear about the projects you're doing. I've read a little bit about the project you're doing with eThekwini, Durban, and we've moved, from industrial scale to large aggregators and now down to residential VPPs. So let's hear from you, John. Looking forward to hear what you have to say. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm usually sitting on the other side of the screen, learning an incredible amount from the experts that you bring onto your webinar. So I'm hoping that I can pay it forward a little bit and hopefully share something of interest with the audience today. As Chris mentioned, I'm John Cornick. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Plentify. And what I'm going to be talking today about is how residential VPPs in South Africa have moved beyond concept. This is going to be a story of what's been built, what's been proven, and what's coming next. Before we get into that, though, just a tiny bit about Plentify to lay the context. Plentify builds a home energy management system and virtual power plant platform that effectively turns distributed residential assets into dispatchable grid resources. The way that we do this is with a collection of bots and agents. The bots are our IoT controllers and include Hotbot and SolarBot, which connect to your geyser and your solar inverter respectively. And agents are our method of controlling appliances via local API when those appliances are internet connected already. Together with all of these assets, we can have a tremendous amount of impact. And today, I'd like to talk to you about 4 projects that we've been involved in of increasing scale and complexity. So the first is Baldwin Properties. We'll talk about one of Africa's largest microgrid VPP portfolios. Then Project Smart Geyser, which showed how this impact that we've delivered on microgrids can be scaled across the national grid. Then Project Smart Solar, which looks at how aggregating multiple types of appliances can magnify the value delivered. And then finally, in scaling to gigawatt hours, we're going to announce a new partnership. So if you hang on till then, hopefully there'll be some exciting news coming your way as well. Starting with Baldwin and one of Africa's largest microgrid VPP portfolios. For those that aren't familiar, Baldwin is South Africa's largest residential property developer. They build these mega estates of 1,000+ apartments per estate, structured as 4-story walk-ups. There's quite a lot of diversity within these estates, between 1 and 3 bedrooms, with property values ranging from about 600,000 all the way up to 11 million rand, and a diversity of consumption as well. What's also interesting is that these estates are all over the country, particularly Gauteng, Western Cape, and KwaZulu-Natal. They have a high concentration, and so it demonstrates that what we've done there works in different climatic regions as well. Baldwin's been installing a lot of solar across all of their estates, which is great, but they face a problem, which is that while solar generates in the middle of the day, it does not generate when their residents want electricity the most, nor when electricity is most expensive, both of which occur during the mornings and evenings during the peak times. And this is where Plentify comes in. So we deploy hotbots into all of their geysers to create a wireless mesh of geysers which intelligently shift demand outside of those dirty, expensive peak times and rather crowd demand into times where solar is available. The result is that Baldwin can install more solar and ensure that solar is better utilized while delivering hot water to all of their residents. To put specific numbers against this, this program has demonstrated that this approach is a win-win for both the utility and the customers, and a proof point for residential microgrids. So from deploying about 9,000 of these bots so far across 13 Baldwin estates, we've seen both an increase in solar and a shifting of remaining grid use towards cheaper times. In particular, we've seen a 79% increase in solar, a 46% reduction in peak energy use, and a 36% reduction in maximum demand, which obviously flows directly through to demand charges as well. To quantify that further and talk about what that means in rands and cents for Baldwin and their residents, we can quantify that as well. And so the Bullwin has reaped rewards. So they're generating value for themselves of about 1,800 Rand per geyser per year through all of this load shifting, which provides a 67% IRR on the infrastructure that they've deployed. At the same time, residents are paying about 1,200 Rand less per geyser per year, purely because their geysers are running more efficiently and using fewer kilowatt hours. On top of that, they are also paying 10% less for electricity than the grid, because Bullwin is passing on some of the benefits of this cheaper energy system to their residents in the form of cheaper tariffs. And finally, because this coordinated set of assets can respond to grid signals, Bullwin has deals in place with Eskom and the City of Cape Town to have a couple of their estates be exempt from load shedding when this was still a thing, and rather respond to events on the grid by voluntarily reducing geyser demand. What this proves is that the technology works, the customer experience is solid, and importantly, the economics at a multi-thousand unit scale check out. Taking this one step further to Project Smart Geyser, this is a project we conducted which shows how the impact that we've delivered at Bullwin is very much scalable across the national grid. This was a project that was funded by ourselves, the GIZ, and EEP Africa. We work closely with the City of Cape Town, Hesekwa Local Municipality, Schonenberg Estate in Somerset West, and CPOA through one of their retirement villages in Hout Bay. And this project was independently verified by University of Cape Town's Measurement and Verification Centre. The project involved deploying 500 hotpots across Cape Town, Hesekwa Municipality, and surrounds, and running a variety of services over the course of 3 years. And from those services, we derived some really interesting results. The first is that if orchestrated correctly, geysers can reduce peak time of use energy use by up to 80% without compromising on hot showers. And you see that illustrated in the chart here, where the purple is the baseline energy consumption of a fleet of geysers. The teal is the actual consumption after load shifting of that fleet of geysers. And so you can see that what we've done here is shift that peak time of use energy, which is highlighted in yellow, from the morning peak into the afternoon and from the evening peak into the early morning. There's a couple of things that are worth calling out here. The first is that we don't reduce peak time of use energy by 100%. We only reduce it by 80% because we leave effectively some capacity available to ensure that geysers can be reheated if necessary to ensure nobody has a cold shower. This is in quite strong contrast to things like ripple relays and load limiting smart meters and internet connected switches that indiscriminately turn off all hot water during these times. And Project Smart Geyser showed that those will result in 15% of showers in winter being cold. So this is a way of adding significant value to the system while not penalizing residents for participating. What's also important is that the evening peak wasn't just shifted to 9 p.m. straight after the peak, but rather shifted into the early morning as close as possible to when people actually wanted to use hot water to maximize the efficiency benefits to the household. The next service we provided was solar load building. So instead of just indiscriminately, again, shifting load outside of peak times, we tried to see whether we could shift this into solar times and shape it to match solar generation. And from this chart, you can see that we did that really effectively, and in fact, managed to double the amount of solar capacity that was consumed by geysers. What you'll notice here is the shape of this curve and the previous curve are very similar, indicating that things like peak time of use load reduction and solar load building are very much compatible with each other. The next thing we did is we coordinated all the geysers to ensure that the aggregate demand did not exceed a limit. And so what you see on the chart on the screen here, in the purple is the 30-minute maximum demand over the course of about 8 months or so, and in teal was the actual maximum demand. And so you can see what we managed to do was bring down maximum demand by about 60% and also flattened it almost entirely, which is really valuable for people building infrastructure because it means you have more certainty as to the amount of load that is going to be pushed through that infrastructure. What's notable here as well is that this project was run in 2023 at the height of load shedding, and you'll notice that teal line over there shows no comeback load spikes. So it's possible to not just reduce maximum demand in general, but also to cater for emergency events on the grid and damaging load spikes. All of this must have cost customers a lot, right? In terms of the efficiency they give up. No, that is not the case. We managed to do all of this while delivering efficiency benefits to end users of between 18 and 27%. And so the utility got all of those benefits that I just mentioned, and the households ended up with a much lower electricity bill and hot showers whenever they wanted it. So what this shows is that the microgrid results we saw in Baldwin are not a special case. They are a preview of what is possible nationally. And if we were to roll out this type of technology to about 25% of homes in SA, we could eliminate, if load shedding was still a thing, 20 hours per month of blackouts for everyone. We could double effectively the throughput of existing distribution infrastructure, deferring expensive upgrades. We could double the amount of solar that could be feasibly built because we'll now have demand to fuel it, reducing emissions by an additional ton per geyser per year, and do all of this while delivering energy savings on people's bills of more than 300 Rand per month and no cold showers. So this was quite a impactful project that has been well received and has helped to advance the conversation around geyser load management in particular. However, we've just started taking the implementation steps on the sequel to Project Smart Geyser, which we are calling Project Smart Solar, which aims to demonstrate Africa's first multi-appliance grid of VPP. As part of this project, we're going to be deploying hotbots and solarbots to 280 homes in the eThekwini municipality, which is the Durban area. This is a project that we are collaborating with the eThekwini municipality with funding from the EU and the AFD. As part of the project, we're going to be controlling, as I alluded to up front, multiple different appliance types. We're going to be coordinating solar PV, batteries, and geysers within homes. And we're going to be aiming to demonstrate that both households and the utility can end up better off through the provision of two services: peak time of use load reduction, which takes strain off the utility, and if the home is on time of use tariffs, helps save them money too. And increasing solar utilization, which means that people use more solar and less grid in their homes, which is great for the homeowner, but it also means that loss-making peak energy is shifted from peak times to solar times, enabling the utility to avoid selling power during loss-making times. We believe that multi-appliances are the future, and the reason we think they're important is it gives you more load and energy per metering point. It gives you more flexibility because there's more diversity in this demand, as others have spoken about, and ultimately that translates into more value for homes and utilities. In other words, having multiple appliances can really magnify the impact of a VPP. It's not a sum of the parts, it's a multiplication. And so hopefully by the end of this, we have demonstrated that there's a strong business case and good value for orchestrating multiple DER types behind a single residential meter. That brings us to the final chapter of this story, which is around scaling to gigawatt hours. In particular, I'm excited to announce a new partnership to create Africa's largest residential VPP. Plentify has been appointed by DEA, a Chinese inverter OEM, as their exclusive VPP partner for South Africa. And we're going to be working together to aggregate and orchestrate their 2.7 gigawatt hours of behind-the-meter batteries that are already deployed in South Africa. To put this in scale, it's massive. It's 12 times larger than Tesla's big battery in Australia. It's enough energy to prevent an entire stage of load shedding for the whole country. And it's almost twice the capacity of Eskom's current 1.4 gigawatt hour BESS program, which is expected to cost 11 billion Rand and take 4 years to build. What's really amazing about this asset base is it's already deployed, and it's diversely deployed across the country, with assets in every province and significant assets in places like Gauteng with more than 1.5 gigawatt hours of storage capacity and more than 500 megawatt hours of storage capacity in Cape Town. And significant capacity elsewhere in the country as well. Our vision is to reward prosumers through the assets that they already have in their home for enrolling in this VPP. And we expect to deliver strong benefits to both the electricity system and to these prosumers. To the electricity system, at an aggregate, at a utility scale level, or on any node of the network, we can provide access to ultra-rapid and highly flexible demand response flexing both demand and energy. We can provide ancillary grid services. We can store wheeled renewable energy if those traders and IPPs can get it down to the LV level. And we can help meet the SAWEM balanced responsibility party obligations, as mentioned earlier as well. On the prosumer side, they suffer no deterioration in service delivery or outage readiness. They earn a fee, a healthy fee as well. And if they're on time of use tariffs, they'll get to arbitrage those tariffs as well. So we believe that having worked in this space for close to 10 years now as Plentify, that the age of the residential VPP has arrived in South Africa. It's proven for scale. As I've walked you through this presentation today, there is strong evidence that this works with a single appliance on a microgrid, that scales across the grid, as shown by Project Smart Geyser. Soon we'll be able to show how that impact is magnified through multi-appliance VPPs, through Project Smart Solar, and ultimately lead to gigawatt scale aggregation in partnership with DEA. And there's a base of millions. There are millions of homes in South Africa, millions of geysers in South Africa, hundreds of thousands of solar systems, which hold the largest untapped flexibility resource in South Africa. The only remaining barrier is policy to make this happen. We've got the technology, we've got the assets. We just need the policy in order to properly monetize this. And there's several paths through which the policy could be enabled. Could enable something like this. It could include things like extending Eskom's existing demand response programs from just geysers to including batteries. It could be activating virtual wheeling on low voltage networks, enabling aggregated DERs to participate in SAWEM, or expanding residential time of use tariffs. This is not something that we believe we can do alone. In fact, we'd love to shape this market together, and we welcome partners to help build South Africa's largest residential VPP, to help drive this needed policy change, and ultimately to reap the rewards for their customers and business. If you're interested, please drop us a line at vpp@plentify.io, and we'd love to work with you. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, John. Wow. Well, it's good to hear that the days of residential VPPs have arrived, as you've said. And that what we're really looking now is to remove some of the policy barriers and to roll this out in a big way to reap the benefits of VPPs. As you pointed out, a residential resource, it's amazing. It is staggering, this resource, if it can be harnessed, as you are trying to do, and as you are actually doing. There's this incredible existing resource that's already been paid for. And it's a question of now using it to the benefit of customers. It's what it's really all about, the benefit of customers, but of course, the utilities benefit as well, tremendously, financially. So I hope that that the utilities and municipalities are watching this webinar closely, because there's exciting times ahead. And thank you for giving us this wonderful presentation. So I'm now going to turn to Francis Jackson, who is the founder of Energy. Francis is going to sort of give us a little wrap-up of what he's heard today, as well as some insights of his own as a person who's involved also in virtual power plants. And we're interested to hear what you're up to and what you're doing, and your messages and takeaways from the webinar today. So Francis, if you can put up your presentation. For the last 25 years, Francis worked on the supply side of energy transition. The slow pace at which the system around it was learning to share value became apparent between developers and customers, between the grid and those connected to it, assets in the field, and markets that pay for what they could do. Francis holds an executive MBA from the UCT Graduate School of Business and a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Toronto, majoring in advanced power systems. His earlier roles include establishing African operations for Wind Lab, investment principal at AIIM, which is part of Old Mutual, his work at Green Cape, at Atlantis Special Economic Zone, and Mpumalanga Green Cluster Agency, and the South African Renewable Energy Master Plan, and more recently at NECOM, that is the National Energy Crisis Commission Committee, and he handled this business interface coordination through the Energy Council of South Africa. Now independent, now working as the founder of Energy. Over to you, Francis, for your wrap up, and let's hear what you are doing at the moment.
Thanks so much, Chris. It's certainly an honor and slightly intimidating to make sure that I can do justice to the great presentations that we've had so far. Let me check that everyone is still here, still present, still paying attention. If you have a wave or put your hand up, then we can see that everyone's still active. Okay, still 500 people, not everyone gone for lunch. Great. So yeah, I get to first say a little bit about Energy, and then I'll take us through what I've managed to compile from everyone's contributions today. It seems very exciting from what everyone is sharing. First up, yeah, I don't need to repeat this. Thanks for the introduction, Chris. So I think a lot of us are responding to, in various ways, various parts of the ecosystem to this set of problems. A large growth in hundreds of thousands of embedded generation systems, many of which are actually invisible effectively to the grid. Network operators can't see or manage those peaks. We've got the changing residual demand profile, the duck curve or buffalo curve, as Evan put it more accurately. And there's significant value sitting on the table in respect of the owners of those assets not necessarily getting everything out of them, as John spoke to. And then we also seeing, this rapidly growing appetite for traded renewable capacity and a shortage of dispatchable capacity, as we wait for the wholesale electricity market to mature, but B, also due to grid constraints bringing new capacity online. So the solution comes in the platform layer that I'm building in Energy that connects all these parties. A set of 3 products, a prosumer returns booster that gets the existing capacity in your system to serve you better, the aggregated services that those can provide in terms of grid flexibility and block trading. So these will obviously evolve as the market conditions permit, but we're working live in the prosumer returns booster and piloting the grid flexibility services and basically trying to make sure that everyone who would benefit from these knows that it's available. Block trading is certainly an emerging space and evolving rapidly, and while the elements are there for what Evan spoke to in Etana, I think we can all agree there's a lot more potential in it as you unlock the rest of the distributed energy systems market. So as far as how we're building this at Energy, basically the idea is to enable the value chain from the device through all the players in between through to the market offtake, which means wherever you are in this ecosystem, there'd be a way for you to plug in. So first up at the device level, if you have smart devices, you're a vendor OEM on inverters, etc., geyser managers that you can work through a protocol, a standardized interface to connect to the platform. The asset owners can learn what potential there is in their system and then capitalize on those by saving and ultimately earning through the VPP offerings. Fleet managers, solar as a service providers, put your fleet on there, look at it through a brand agnostic dashboard and find where the value on the table still lies that you can unlock for your customers. If you have an existing aggregated fleet, the idea would be to be able to enable you to interface with the market, find off-takers for you, and through a standardized interface, settle on pricing and dispatch. And then to connect to those VPP off-takers, the traders, buyers and sellers, and of course, the network operators looking for good flexibility services. System is live and market testing. I won't take you through all of this, but you'll get this in the pack. You can go through it. So I think one thing that's pretty close to my heart and what we look to offer is that through such a platform, we can find a win-win. I'll talk to it a little more in where are we going with this. But the premise being that if you can find the ability to give individual users, individual asset owners choice, and that simultaneously they can serve the greater good, then I think you've unlocked something that could be really transformative here. So if you take an example here, this is a small fleet of distributed energy systems with a baseline kind of spiky demand profile shown in red, that it's possible to find an optimal level at which you could call this so-called baseload, using it in its proper sense, which is to refer to the demand itself. So this is the net grid demand, the residual demand after these, home systems or business systems with their energy management systems has then been flattened, if you like, to form the equivalent baseload. So we can figure out how much each of those users would contribute to that outcome, and then distribute the costs and savings appropriately. And just in this particular example, you could see that should you flatten this fleet's profile and call it baseload, it'll cost just 9% more than if each individual user was purely operating in their self-interest. What that really means, the corollary is that that's a tipping point, that if you wanted a flat profile out of this portfolio, you would a 9% increase in cost would be your tipping point, which doesn't rule out that it could be a net win-win through just better optimization, as John pointed out in his presentation. So really the ecosystem we're creating here is finding that there's hidden value on the table. It's in underutilized systems. It's in poor alignment with time of use value on the system. And by using such a platform, we can actually find where it meets the objectives of the system operator. So to wrap up, to look at what unlocking the virtual power plant potential really looks like here, let's imagine we're going from this sort of starting point where you have kind of based on our legacy of load shedding in particular, an adversarial kind of relationship between customers or consumers and network operators. There's these kind of worldviews that on the prosumer side, I had to get my solar system because the utility couldn't provide me electricity. It's mine, keep your hands off it. Why should I let you influence how I run it? And on the other side, the network operators who are seeing, the buffalo curve emerging, who's feeling the destabilization or the disruption of the existing business models is, we need to control these systems. These pesky users are going to destabilize everything. This is the kind of archetype we start with. But what if, through introducing trusted intermediaries, these are the virtual power plant and energy management system ecosystem players, and introducing the tools to bring price elasticity, we could potentially move to a more harmonious and synergistic relationship where the prosumers are paying off the investment faster, supporting the grid when it actually reduces their electricity costs, and the network operators are benefiting from less peaking charges, deferred infrastructure investments. And I'm referring to tools for price elasticity here because you cannot simply put in time of use tariffs and expect your run-of-the-mill user to be able to respond to them. You need to have some means by which their system is enabled to do so, and tools such as energy management systems and virtual power plant platforms that can speak to them enable just that. So looking at the value chain, we can break it into two kind of groups. We have the grid flexibility service class and the energy trading service class, and both of those are spoken to today by various parties. And if I may, Sven, I hope you don't mind me borrowing from your map of the value chain. So this is how nodes broke it down, and I think if I just look at who was in the room today, we can see we covered a large part of this value chain with a couple of notable exceptions. And guys, please, if I've misrepresented you, please speak up. Let me know. What I observed in the discussion today is some parties in this ecosystem are already building, an extension to different parts of the value chain or have aspirations to do so. So bear with me on my assessment from what I got so far. So I see we've very well covered, the spectrum from asset owners through aggregators, flexibility service providers, and the commercial aggregation part of those, and market operation. and Meridian providing a good overview and their ongoing work in what we could do in enabling these synergies for the ecosystem. What notably is missing, obviously, is the other side of this transaction as far as it refers to the market off-taker or the system operator or network operator. So what would be the voices in the room and what would be their views if we asked the NTCSA, the system and market operator, Eskom distribution, various municipalities or local networks, and mini or microgrid operators. And then a few appeals to development of policy and matters around tariffs. Now, what would NERSA have to say about those? So really, we have an ecosystem conversation. I've summarized what contributions came from each of those present. Won't dwell on it. I think we've really had a good cross section of the aggregator and role, a view from the asset owners themselves, how you could be taking a 20% IRR through to 30% IRR if you could, augment your offering as the energy group presented, and Etana showing that pooling beats bilaterals on scale, and Node speaking to the precedent and live flexibility markets, and Plentify, and most recently giving those case studies showing that it's real, it's happening today, and it can be scaled. I have a long list of the barriers and enablers that were raised. You can come back to this in the deck when it's shared later, but I summarized them in a few proposed steps on the way forward in the last slide upcoming. But I'm going to talk to just a couple of them, what I think are some of the most sort of seminal to unlocking the sector. First up, it was asked, I think it was asked by Nick from Meridian, how do you actually procure? Is it possible to do so under our existing MFMA structures? And I've been reflecting on procurement models for, in particular, flexibility services. So I've put it here as we have the status quo and we have the learning path. So presently, when demand response, for example, has been procured, we have an approach to say we want you to do this thing with this technology. A tender goes out, one party is appointed, and they're locked in for the particular term of that contract, and then you wait and see. And if things don't work out, all your eggs are kind of in one basket. Whoever owns that part of the value chain then defines the whole shape of the rest of the market, and you have to wait for the end of that before you can try something else. The alternative is the learning path. If you have a particular problem, like my municipality, has costs that are unmanageable in peaking periods, solve that problem. The market can then provide the solutions that could work for you, and it'll do so in different ways. So you're letting everyone present ways to solve, and it'll bubble up that the ones that do best do best. So here you could be technology agnostic, you have a more competitive value chain, and the procurement mechanisms for that involve we would call dynamic procurement. So you would have a first pass where you pre-qualify. So you've got multiple aggregators who can participate, or virtual power plant service providers or operators who meet your standards, and you set the compensation terms, your tariffs, and you can run mini calls or set terms. You pay for what's delivered, and you adjust as you learn. So the precedent for that, I think, is in place in South Africa. We don't necessarily need the fully developed platforms for flexibility markets yet, such as Nodes offers or Piclaflex. We can get there one day. We can get started though with existing procurement mechanisms. So continuous pre-qualification exists as a mechanism. We can have framework agreements. We have the e-tenders infrastructure, and as far as I know, and Nick, please tell me if you've learned otherwise, we could actually get started under the existing regulatory framework. Then metering, I'm just going to give you a small anecdote here, a case of a customer, very typical residential customer, who is saving money against their baseline monthly cost here, shown in grey. They've installed solar. potentially they could be getting another 350 Rand a month from optimizing it, running it better. That aligns quite well with what John was sharing. But you also see that in this case, on this particular tariff, they could be getting an additional 720 Rand a month on average over the year by exporting. We don't know yet what they could be getting from being part of a VPP. However, to enable that extra 720 Rand a month, they need to be registered to export, and that comes with certain requirements. And in this case, they would need to spend 45,000 Rand to have the export-enabled meter, the AMI meter, installed in a new boundary box on their border, property border. So that 45,000 Rand is not atypical. We see actually the ranges from 20 to 50, but it really collapses the entire business case of being an exporting party. And if you wanted to make the most of virtual power plants, you need to enable that bi-directional metering. And we got a few challenges around that. So currently not all municipalities enable exports. And when you have some of them, the required installation costs can kind of collapse their business case before you even get out the gates. And then meter data, Evan spoke a fair bit to this. Not all network service providers have systems in place for meter data sharing, for validation, for settlement. You need that. You need good governance so that you can allocate access to counterparties where prosumer consent has been given. Sometimes check meters are in place, but that's not necessarily pragmatic at scale, across many small systems. And what is the status of nurses' net billing rules with respect to where meter cost allocation should sit in the system? I'm not sure that that's actually being implemented as prescribed at this time. And could there, once we understand the value proposition better, actually be a possible case for the distributor to cover those costs? You could find that actually the net benefit to the distributor is there. So 2 more slides, Chris, and then we'll wrap up. The other key principle is consumer choice or customer choice. So if we're going to get to a mature market here, I think what comes with it is that you enable choice in the market. Competitiveness, democratization, market enabling, these all mean moving towards greater choice and agency for consumers. We have this baseline that on retail in South Africa for electricity, we have little to no choice at all. And the only way, you can kind of give yourself a choice is if you have access to finance or if you have commercial scale, then you get your own systems, or you're trading at commercial scale. The same should be true for the stack here. So we cannot have that in adopting and implementing virtual power plants that everything is bundled. So retailer, metering, hardware, energy management system, and platform, these are separate services. Consumers should be able to choose each independently as well. And the alternative kind of status quo approach of kind of command control models, which might be that the network operator prefers to reach behind the meter to control, to regulate, etc. That kind of all moves in the opposite direction. And if you were to say, give your network operator control of your inverter, I think you'd have major consumer pushback. So really what we're saying is, as the market evolves, ensure that there's real choice through that stack for participants. To wrap up, I think I hope I've done justice to the points raised by everyone in the sessions today. Asset owners and fleet managers, get started now. Start measuring your load. Let's get some interoperability standards in place. And traders and off-takers, they observe, if we co-design these standardized interfaces, we're on our way. Network operators, procure the problem, not the tech. Expand your definition of demand response so you deal with the net grid demand, not just particular appliances. Get those time of use tariffs in place. And let's get a VPP roadmap in place, accelerate the AMI rollout, and mandate standardized granular meter data settlement and access. And SAWM must happen. We also need to enable that we can reach deeper into that, whether it's low voltage, medium voltage, or high voltage, to really tap into that the rest of the possible market. Thank you. Over to you, Chris.
Well, thank you, Francis, for a very comprehensive overview of what was presented, what Energy is up to, and your view on the way forward to develop this market. I think we've seen from the presentations great opportunity, significant challenges ahead, but I think it's going to be worth it in the end. I just want to respond to something you mentioned, Francis. There are some people that are not in the room, or perhaps they're on the room as as participants, and attendees. But I did invite Eskom Distribution. I did invite Eskom NTCSA, who are also responsible for the system operator, but they had other priorities at the moment. But I hope, and I do believe they're an important part of all of this, and I hope they will be participating in the future. And there will be future webinars on the subject of VPPs as we move forward. The speakers were very carefully chosen today, from Nodes being, bringing this international experience, Energy Group looking at large-scale, users and aggregating them, and a focus on battery storage, and then we had Etana, as a large aggregator and trader, and we had Plentify, really looking at residential VPPs, and the opportunities there. And of course, we have Meridian Economics, who did the opening address, and they are preparing, and it's work in progress still, but they are preparing a roadmap for VPPs going forward. And we're going to have more webinars on VPPs. We're going to hear more from Meridian and their roadmap and how it rolls out, and for the other players in this sector. So I want to also thank our panelists for answering a lot of the questions. If I look, something like 29 questions have been posed, of which 27 questions have been posed, 23 have been answered. There are 4 that are still open questions. I've been watching the questions, and I'd like to, put some questions to the panelists based on the questions I've seen, which have been largely answered. And I would ask all of our presenters if they can switch on their cameras and their microphones, so that we can have this open discussion. And I'd like to put the first question to John Cornick. And it came from one of the questions, that was posed on the Q&A. And that's the question of interoperability between different smart devices. We've talked about smart inverters, smart batteries. You've talked about you announced your partnership with DAI as one of them, as a major inverter manufacturer active in South Africa, and battery company available in South Africa. But what about, how is this all going to work? Because there are different manufacturers and batteries and appliances and inverters, and how do you sort of develop a common standardized communication protocol? Or do you just have to have drivers or protocols, drivers for each individual manufacturer? Like I know in the world of electricity metering, they had a thing called MV90, multi-vendor, so that it could talk to all kinds of meters from different manufacturers, but each had their own proprietary protocol. But MV90 seemed to package them all together. How do you see this working in this multi-supplier environment where customers need choice too of OEMs?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. So at the moment, we are solving it with elbow grease. There isn't a unified interoperability framework for all the assets we're looking to control, so we have to integrate them all one by one, which is relatively expensive. In order for this market to scale, an interoperability layer or protocol would be useful, and we've seen this emerging in other parts of the world through things like Modbus Sunspec and some other OpenADR, some other frameworks. So I think it's necessary in order for the market to operate efficiently and to grow as fast as possible, but it's not necessary for the market to take off. There's still ways to make this work in the interim until those standards catch up. I'd recommend that Francis takes a crack at this one as well, because I know it's a problem that's close to his heart.
Yeah, Francis, please come in here. Give us your thoughts.
Yeah, I think good points have been made by John and also by Sven, that the most important thing is to get started. Don't hold up making some things work by waiting for standards to be in place and everyone to adopt them and sit around the table and think one way out. So that as a first principle, let's just start talking and start making our devices and our energy management systems talk to each other and talk to the aggregating optimization platforms. Yeah, as John put it, my aspiration is to be able to provide a level of kind of published open interfaces that you're able to plug into the platform, knowing that this is the standard we adopt, and these are the kinds of exchanges we require for you to participate. So that's the journey that we're starting. We'll be trying to build those interfaces based on tried and tested standards. But if anyone has their bespoke system, very happy to talk to you and see if we can make an adapter that translates into the standard interface.
Yeah, thanks. And I think, as John put it, it requires elbow grease, a lot of hard work. And I know in the metering environment, which I was in many years ago, there were no standards. It was, the new electronic metering devices. Each manufacturer had its own communications protocol, and it just had to be dealt with by elbow grease and developing drivers for each different meter manufacturer. It can be done. It's hard work, but standards seem to me to follow technology, not vice versa. Standards don't lead the way. Technology happens and standards follow maybe years later. So thanks for that observation. I see a question from Devon Chown, which is slightly off topic, but I still think very relevant in the sense that, we're talking about new renewable energy resources and platforms and markets and things like that. And his question is, given all these market developments and SAWM and all of that, how and where does the renewable energy IPP program run by the IPP office, public procurement program, which is slow and bureaucratic and complex, and where does it fit into this whole new world, this new framework? Or is the state, or is the position of this public procurement process, the renewable energy IPP program, is it sort of reaching the end of its life? Not that it's going to be a sudden cliff, but maybe it's going to perform a lesser and lesser role in the future. And I'm wondering, perhaps, Nick, if you can perhaps take this on as a person who's looking at the roadmap. Where do you see the future of the IPP office and the REAP program?
Yeah, thanks, Chris, and thanks for the question. I see the REAP as a little bit separate, and it kind of speaks to the broader market transition we're going through at the moment with the introduction of the SAWM. Obviously the REAP has provided a lot of energy into the market, and VPPs typically offer more flexibility, so they're not necessarily in competition with one another. But we've seen the significant curtailment we're experiencing at the moment really reduces the ability of us to integrate renewables onto the grid. And that's definitely an area where VPPs and other flexibility measures can help relieve some of that, which would enable REAP or private projects to provide renewable energy onto the system. So I think that's where I see the kind of the match between the two.
And while you're still on can you give us a little bit further insight of your study and where it's at the moment and where it's going and timing in the work that you're doing ahead? Thanks.
Yes, sure. So we're currently engaging multiple stakeholders to identify barriers and enablers to VPPs. And we're very keen to engage with various interested parties. We've heard a lot from this very valuable presentation, and there's a lot of movement in this space. So we're very excited about that. We're also currently doing the kind of quantification side, so trying to quantify given an indicative value of the value of VPPs at a system level. So we're currently doing that with our power system modeling team. And for timeframes, we're hoping to publish the roadmap by the end of the year.
Okay. Thank you. Fantastic. Well, we're going to watch the space carefully and looking forward to engaging with Meridian going forward, keeping the market up to date on the work that you're doing and the developments arising out of this work. If I can put a question, please, to Sven. Sven, you have indicated what Norway is doing in the electric vehicle market, really a world leader in the uptake of electric vehicles. And I'd love to hear a little bit more detail about, vehicle to home, vehicle to grid, and how does this feature as a possible dispatchable resource? Not just, obviously there's the residential level, but there's also, buses and parking areas for buses where you may have a huge resource of energy storage in a depot, a bus depot, or a truck depot, or a taxi depot. How is this happening in Europe and in Norway? And what is the state of things as a VPP resource?
Thank you, Chris. And I did mention some of this as part of the presentation as well, that with the high numbers of new car sold being electrical over the last few years, now more than 90% of new cars being sold being electrical. We have a massive fleet of electric cars that are coming into play, and it's not only the residential cars and smaller cars, buses and depots, like you're saying. And what we've seen so far is that in the initial stages of implementing these markets, there were a lot of these smaller EVs that were on a residential level participating in market programs. But over time, we did see that some of that load that was prevalent during peak hours was shifted through tariff structures to night hours. So in that case, we did see that the EV flexibility wasn't so necessary through markets, but it was actually managed by tariffs. In Belgium, for example, we have the opposite effect. We haven't seen that tariffs actually capture the value of flexibility in the same way. So in that market, we see EVs being very valuable for grid operators. When it comes to buses and larger loads, so fast chargers, we're seeing that large energy operators of these chargers are a bit reluctant to participate in programs. Very similar to what we heard from John as well. It's all about their main business, which is to ensure that there's enough energy to charge the buses and other big vehicles when the need is greater. So when they're coming into the depots to be charged. But what they're then doing as an add-on is to add batteries on the sites. So when they're adding batteries on the sites, it's possible to change and to use batteries at times where the grid is at its highest stress level. And we've seen this coming more and more, and we're seeing that the economics of doing those investments are getting greater. And with that, the potential of using this to the grid is also increasing. So that is definitely a value proposition that we're seeing coming into the market.
Yeah, really interesting. I want to now put this to both Jason and to Evan, because I kind of got two different messages. Actually, and also to John. Okay, this is a kind of a combined question that maybe all of you can come in and make your point. But I think Evan made a statement. He said there was limited opportunity for flexibility in South Africa. And Jason indicated something a bit different. I got the message from him that there is opportunity, large-scale battery energy storage behind the meter gives this kind of opportunity. And John indicated the opportunities in the residential sector, with smart batteries, smart inverters, smart appliances, that there actually is a resource that can be used flexibly. So I'm just interested to reconcile your comment, Evan, and maybe you can kick off with the comments from some of the other presenters. Over to you, Evan.
Yeah, Chris, look, I think technically there's huge potential and there's already lots of flex in the system. My comment was more that we actually don't have the market mechanisms or programs currently to harness that potential, including existing assets that are already active and actually not delivering the value that they could to the system. So, in our business today, effectively, we're giving value to customers from providing them with renewable energy at with price certainty over a certain period. But there's no additional value beyond shifting power to incentivize installing batteries as part of our portfolio, other than literally shifting some power from daytime to peak times. But actually, like, if you put in big batteries, they could be providing many more services to the grid. They could be avoiding grid upgrades. They could be providing ancillary services in real time. And we can do that all the way down to residential level, as John's presentation from Plentify showed. So I think we're saying the same thing. The capability and the technical solution exists today, but the market mechanism to actually reward that and incentivize that flexibility and unlock the value for the grid isn't yet there.
Yeah, thanks. I think you've clarified that nicely. So, it's not really a contradiction. We've just got to harness this opportunity, that there is flexibility out there, but we've got to put in place the mechanisms and incentives to harness it. Jason, do you want to just come in and add anything to that?
Thanks, Chris. No, I think Evan explained it well, and that I think in my presentation was the value of today, which is there exactly as Evan's spoken about, shifting the energy from lower cost periods to higher cost periods, and then with the ability also to reduce your risk to potential oversupply. And I agree, that's the value of today. And I think also if you just think about that space that we were talking about where you could net off to, and now you can use batteries to fill. We're not saying yet that it makes economic sense to, use batteries outside of the peak and standard period. So to that degree, I agree. There is a limit to the value. And I think what Evan was exactly alluding to now is what I was talking about, the value of tomorrow. And 100%, that those higher rates of return, that's looking at other markets and people that were early movers, but those markets all had, firm economics and frameworks in place where we're still all wondering what is the value of capacity. So 100% agree that still needs to be fleshed out. Sure.
And over to you, John, if you want to add anything on that.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I very much agree with what Evan and Jason said. Technology is there, policy is lacking, but some of the policies are there. They just need to be implemented or accelerated. But yeah, I very much agree with Evan and Jason.
Thank you. Colleagues, we've actually run out of time. It's 12:42 at the moment, and this is supposed to end at 12:40. So we're kind of 2 minutes over time. There are a couple of open questions. I'm going to download those questions and get them to the presenters. But I see a lot of questions have actually been answered, and that's good because we do need to engage with our audience who are listening in intently. And I just want to say in conclusion, thank you for our presenters. Thank you for the companies behind you who have supported this webinar. So it's Meridian Economics, Nodes, Etana Energy, Plentify, Energy Group, and Energy. So I've thought these presentations have been truly exceptional. It's given me a new understanding of this sector, of the opportunities and the challenges and the barriers and what has to be done going forward, and the roadmap that Nick is busy working on. I think it's been an eye-opener to me, and I hope it has been an eye-opener to the audience as well. We're going to do more of these webinars on virtual power plant because I think this is a very fast evolving sector. It's customer focused, and I hope that our utilities, Eskom, municipal utilities, system operator, NTCSA are all watching this webinar very, very closely because it impacts them significantly, and they are a potential participant in this. And I do believe that electricity distributors, whether they are Eskom or municipal distributors, have got to become far more customer focused. And we've seen, as pointed out by Francis Jackson, we come from this divide where customers are, not trusting utilities, and utilities, are acting in a way that is not customer focused. And the role of VPPs can bridge this and turn this into a win-win situation for both customers and utilities, as John pointed out, the benefits that accrue to everybody in the examples that he gave. So thanks to everybody for joining this webinar and for participating. I'm sorry for those that we haven't given answers yet, but we will try and follow up with that. You will get a feedback report tomorrow at about 9 o'clock with copies of all the presentations and a link to view the video on demand. Everybody who registered for the event will get that. A lot of people, register on the assumption that they will be getting that. They can't attend, during the day, but they can watch it in their own time. So that's an important outcome of these webinars is the document pack that comes with them, because there is a lot to study. You can hear a presentation, but actually one needs to study it in depth to really get the value out of it that you need. So thanks again to everybody. Been great to see you, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. We try and do these monthly. All the best. Thank you.